Love. Today we have Dr. Likely back again. We're going to talk about self care beyond bubble baths. And so, it's interesting. I was trying to figure out, I wonder what she's going to talk about today. Oops. So, this is me double checking that I went live on all these different places.
All good.
Okay, so I can see that I'm live. Okay, YouTube and all right, so there's a delay with the other one. That's okay. So let's get started. And Dr. Likely, thanks for joining me again. It
Of
was really a pleasure to have you on the last session that we had, and you're full of ideas. You're full of uh, I learned a great deal from your session. So I thought this would be nice to see if we can explore, some other possibilities in terms of, maybe you'll even, co-host, have your own show, things like that.
yes. All the things.
Awesome. So what does that mean? Self-care beyond bubble baths.
Yes. So I recognize and realize like the conversation around self care always leans toward something around spending money, some type of pampering luxury per se. And then we tend to make it like a nail shop visit, right? Like let's
Mm-hmm.
focus in this time, this few hours of the day. This is just for me. I'm gonna, turn the massage chair on and lean back. I might even do like an extra gel foot bath thing or an extra like the paraffin wax. Like let me just splurge a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
or it'll be, well, I just need a bath. One bath will fix it. And it's more of how can we make self care a part of the day, a part of the lifestyle, a part of regular activity instead of being an extreme when we are burnt out already. So, how do
Mm.
we include kind of this mindfulness, this intention,
Wow.
apart from just, I took a bubble bath once 2 months ago and I felt better. I went and got a massage one time, right? So, how do we, you know, take some time to listen to our bodies instead of just trying to do a quick band aid in the moment, and make it more of a lifestyle choice?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big question. How can we? I think that's an answer I'd like too, because it just feels as if when you have a thousand things to do,
Mm-hmm.
the idea of pausing to
Yeah.
do a small, self care, even though have to say I'm getting better at doing that,
Yes.
but for someone who is in academia, for someone who is, I mean, look, we're in academia because we're not exactly normal people, right? We do like to work, we like
Yes.
to study. Who does that for the rest of their life,
For
kind of
fun, right?
thing, right? Right, exactly. And so there's sometimes there's even a level of addiction to studying. And
Mhm.
so how do you switch gears? How do you get?
Switching gears because you can't turn it off, right? To be a researcher is always researching.
Hmm.
So what I like to do is at least research things that are fun. So for me, I always love reading about and learning from Black women about work with Black women and girls. And so instead of just always reading for like information to cite a source, it's
Hmm.
just reading too to expand my horizon. I'm not really big on fiction. I've never been big on fiction, but I
Oh my
don't
goodness.
always have to read like
Yeah.
the intense handbook of learning sciences, right? I don't have to do the heavy lifting. I have a book, um, Ebony Janice Moore. She wrote a book. It's lovely, and it's called All the Black Girls Are Activists. Great,
Ah.
fantastic. And it is talking about like a new wave of feminism
Hmm.
where that's not the main bit of my focus. I do incorporate some black critical feminism into my work. So this fits like on that line of
Hmm.
like I could absolutely cite it for research. Also, it's a part of just expanding what I'm learning about. And so I try
Right.
to choose books where I might not have read them if they were a part of research. Like if they were a part of the research, I'm going to read them anyway. But if it
Right.
can be a black woman author that isn't always directly in line with my research. I want to read it as a relaxing moment. Another one is Rest as Resistance by
Mm-hmm.
Trisha Hersey. Again, that is not the main focus of my work, but also it is an opportunity for me to learn something different from other Black women that is in alignment with some values and views that I hold. So it's you never turn it off, but you can change what you're reading and how you're approaching it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I thought I was the only one who had a hard time sometimes reading fiction books.
No,
I was
it's
like, oh,
difficult.
it is. You know, I have. There are very few. Like there was years ago, there was one fiction book I would go back to, and this fiction book was by a Guyanese author, Edgar
Mm-hmm.
Mettelhauser, who wrote a book called My Bones, My Flute, and I've written the book. I'm not sorry, not written the book. I've read the book over the years a couple of times, and there's something about it that makes me revisit it. I think just because it was so beautifully written,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I guess that's part of it. You know, even when you mentioned, researching what you're interested in, for me, that still feels like I'm on,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because then you're in this mode of, oftentimes, at least for me, and I know for many of us, and for your work too, we're doing this with a purpose.
Right.
And that purpose is bigger than us. And sometimes it leaves us in on mode.
Mm-hmm.
So, and sometimes it's caused a lot of stress.
Yes. Yes.
So I can't relate. I mean, even though I'm sure it's easier, it's less stressful than if
Yeah.
it was something I was not interested in. Because,
Right.
frankly speaking, I can't even get myself to read sometimes something I'm
Mm-hmm.
not interested in.
I've learned the hard way, seeking tenure. So, in some of the activities, research projects,
Yeah.
teams, like collaboration
Okay.
efforts, this isn't always my thing that sets my soul on fire. Also,
Okay.
it's cool. So it's been a part of that learning process where
I
how
see.
can I still find some joy, some new bit of information, like finding
Mm-hmm.
some rest in that, even where it's not
Mm-hmm.
always a heavy lift. So where are the fun parts? And I
Okay.
think that's a part of self-care, like finding the part that isn't the I have to do this, here we go again, but also it
Right.
triggers the curiosity, the inquisitiveness. It's I'm learning something new. So I enjoy the learning part, but it's not always my favorite thing to do a
Mm-hmm.
project that is not fully in line with my personal research trajectory.
Wow. That makes sense.
Yeah. Hmm.
I guess because I confess, I've always been pushing against the grain
Yes.
because it really becomes torturous
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
read something you're not interested in, especially
Yes.
something where someone, I feel like, oh, you're not really providing me with any solution. You're saying more of the same. That person said, that person said, that person said. So I feel tortured.
Yes.
Well, when it comes to pushing things forward, one of the things I ended up doing when I first started to do this was in my paper on, I don't remember what the name of it is now, where I had my pre service teacher do multimedia art science activities.
Hmm.
um what I ended up doing, for some of the papers that I felt like, oh, you're just telling me the same thing, is I reinterpreted it in my own framework,
Right.
right?
Yes.
In my own mindset, so I can say what new thing this could say.
Hmm.
But then having to push against the grain all the
Is
time
work. Yeah.
is where is exhausting, right?
Right.
But for me emotionally, I just couldn't bring myself to just, repeat what someone else has said or
Right.
done. I
Right.
just felt like it was just an absolute waste of my time.
That is not fulfilling in any way, not satisfying in
No.
any way. Yeah, I completely understand that. And how do you now recharge and restore after being exhausted by reading or seeing all of what you already know? Because you already had
Hmm.
your own experience. Like if I'm doing my research around, I started around underrepresented populations in biology education because
Mm,
I was a biology major and I didn't
right,
see
right.
a lot of other Black women in that space.
Hmm.
And reading now about it, it's like I lived it, I understand it, and it's just
Yeah.
it's bogging down. It's so heavy every time you
Hmm.
read it. It's like, yeah, I know, I know. So give me something else that frees me, that lifts me, that feels good, that gives
Mm.
me fuel to reimagine something. Because right
Right.
now we're just seeing the same thing over and over, and that's just not fun.
Right.
And it doesn't make you want to continue. So, how do you now care for yourself in those moments that you know the literature is not going to say anything different than what your experience was? Like, you still
Mm.
had that first person experience, and you're grateful that there is things to like cite sources that
Mhm.
you can pull from, but also where is any light at the end of this? Where does it change? And that's
Mm.
where the self-care comes in, because one of my mentors, Dr. Natalie King, said that you can't do the work if you're not here. Because I
Mm.
was on the quick path to burnout. And
Absolutely.
she's like, when is the last time that you stopped and dreamed? And I'm like, I haven't, because I've been
Mm.
working, I've been pushing.
Right.
So that's how it became so intentional to lean into the rest, lean into the quiet, even if it comes with a little guilt and shame and it's super hard,
Mhm.
but you feel better. You have fresher eyes, you have fresher thoughts to now dream of something different. Because if you
Wow.
just sit and read the same things over and over, it hurts. It does hurt. I fully agree.
Yeah. It's like letting the emotional catch up, right, with the intellectual.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And that's something that, as I've been working and talking to other, specifically other Black women,
Mhm.
graduate students, masters, PhDs, EDDs, students, and they are in that phase of frustration, I'm like, you're doing it right. That means that you have a question that you're seeking an answer to, and the answer
Mhm.
isn't out there in the papers already. You're doing
Right.
it right. So it's trying to remind them that it is hard work. It's heavy lifting when you say that let the intellectual catch up with the emotional, because sometimes the emotions get there first and we're
Mhm.
still trying to make sense of it, and all we can feel is sad. And so it's like,
Yeah.
especially again, if we're trying to push forward, if we're trying
Wow.
to change things, it's exhausting. So how do you now make good space for yourself
Mhm.
in the process? I learned the
Wow.
hard way. And by learning the hard
Wow.
way, I got into a PhD program completely ill prepared, just
Mhm.
jumping in. And within the first year and some change, I started therapy. Best decision ever. So
Mhm.
that
Absolutely.
that helped, like,
Yep.
strengthen the toolbox in a way that research classes never could give you.
Mm-mm.
Even graduate cohorts, like, you don't get tools to journal. No
Mhm.
one tells you it's okay to throw a tantrum right here. Throw a fit, get back to
Mhm.
it. So
Right.
now I find big joy in telling other Black women in the same spaces, like, it's okay when you make your, like, timeline of a proposal defense, add
Mhm.
in a week to fall apart, because you're gonna fall apart. So
Right.
put it into your plan and let that be time to care for yourself, time to put all the things down, don't read a thing, go for a walk.
Mhm.
Nobody tells us this in methods like 101.
Mm-mm.
Like, nobody says that if you do an autoethnography, you also probably need to seek counseling, because you're going to start undoing and unraveling and
Mhm.
sharing and being vulnerable, where in other methodologies that's not required in the same way. You'll have
Yeah.
a positionality statement, you'll have a like what the researcher's, like, identity is, that'll be included, but a
Mhm.
different mode of research that is bearing yourself,
Mhm.
and nobody holds your hand through it and say, oh, by the way, you might need to cry now. By the way, you might need to put this down and go touch the
Yeah.
grass, go stand
Yeah.
outside, go to a park. When's the last time we've been on swings? Like, it's, how do we care for who we are as a whole person, outside of researchers, outside of always pushing forward, outside of just creatives, but actual as whole humans.
Oh
And
my gosh.
sometimes researching humanizes the researcher, and we lose ourselves doing great work. And yeah, so I'm
Right.
like, wait a minute, how do we not? And so that's where that self-care, past the bubble bath, one time, this one-off thing, but as a part of the process.
Hmm. Wow. I'm wowing because I've been through the same thing
Yes.
with the research I'm doing, and I've been through it. It was amazing. I had to stop, I had to take breaks. I had to, it's like, okay, I can't look at this history, it's dark, it's negative. I'm trying to bring something positive. um and yes, the therapy thing, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I've been through it for years and years and years and years. But you also bring up something that makes me wonder too. When you say nobody does it, I don't know. It makes me wonder if it has the same impact depending on who your researcher is,
Yes.
because we're vested in it for different reasons. We're vested
Mm-hmm.
in it a lot of times, for our own emotional freedom,
Mm-hmm.
right, and for our own working towards freedom. We're
Mm-hmm.
not quite there when it comes to freedoms.
Yeah.
And I recently, yeah, I don't know if I should say this, but I recently had to make the choice between, am I gonna keep doing a certain work even though I can earn money from it, or am I gonna, you know I got to the point where I just couldn't do do the type of work I was asked to do, because my motivated thinking was very different. My
Mm-hmm.
reason for doing it was very different. It just felt torturous because I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I was doing someone else's work,
Mm-hmm.
reaching someone else's goal, and not reaching a goal that frees us. So I think a lot of it, comes down to, our why and our how, right?
Right.
Our why, we do the type of work because we're thinking of being emotionally free, academically
Mm-hmm.
free, intellectually
Mm-hmm.
free, monetarily free, socially free, politically free. And there's a lot of that invested, and the idea of doing it for that freedom means that there's a part of us that is still not free, or in some
Yeah.
ways
And
completely colonized.
recognizing that
Hmm.
other people, other researchers aren't doing it for the same reasons.
They're not
I
doing it for
think,
the same reasons.
yeah,
No.
I think that's
Hmm.
what surprised me and frustrated me at the same time. It's like
Yeah.
I want to intentionally change things. I purposefully recognize I'm going against the grain.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, you have colleagues, peers, some people like that are in higher like levels of authority that are, I'm doing this because this is what the job description says and that's it. And it's
Right.
like, wait, you have no sole purpose here? So it's that it's like you can just move through life like that. Like that's the confusion for me because it's like
Yeah.
I know why I chose this or why I do certain work or want to collaborate with certain researchers and scholars and like other people just it was a easy project. My
Hmm.
advisor already had this going, so I just joined in. It's like you're not invested in the same way and you can feel it. It's tangible.
Well,
And it's like how do you and yeah, sometimes I'm just wondering like how do you do that? How does that work? Like it's completely separate. I'm kind of surprised.
yeah, I guess, it's wow. I mean, it'd be nice to have that discussion with someone, right?
Hmm.
In terms of, I imagine it's part of self preservation as well,
Yeah.
right? We don't know quite how to make that separation,
Hmm.
because so much our freedom and so much of who we are, and is still tied,
Yeah.
right? And there's still the burden of, my accomplishment will really affect how others accomplish later, because we're not
Hmm.
quite at that level of freedom yet,
Hmm.
right? Um, wow. You know, I think for me too, when you think about self care beyond bubble baths, I think for me, a lot of this explains why I even move towards the creative side of things,
Hmm.
right? I sit down there and creating, as a solution,
Hmm.
as a as a way to figure out how do you love yourself, you know, figure out, and even throughout the, something I had to consciously think about,
Yeah.
because here you are, you're grappling with all these negative things. You know that the children you're creating for will have to grapple with it somewhat. You don't want them necessarily to grapple it to the extent that
Right.
you are,
Right.
right? And to feel that pain that you are, even though I don't think all pain is a bad thing, but
Hmm.
um so how do you get to that point, this pain to that level of joy, right?
Yeah.
And so this is also where I brought the happiness into the project, we're interviewing people, figuring out what their lived experiences are, and
Mhm.
all the things, the cultural capital and science
Right.
capital it had to give, because we talk about those things, but what is it?
Right.
As I started doing my interviews, I realized we talk about it, everything as usual, like it's cliche, right? We don't really know what it is. We're still trying to
Mhm.
figure out what it is, right? And we use those words so loosely.
Right.
And so, I started realizing how, I like to create, with my music, with my
Mhm.
multimedia products,
Mhm.
just creating things that, where I'm able to capture the joy in these different individuals,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Take it out of this completely academic sphere to the human sphere.
Right.
Um,
And that's the beyond the bubble bath. But it also is
Absolutely.
who
Wow.
or when do you get permission? When do you give yourself permission to say, I need
Mm,
a different outlet? Because I know that I lost the fun, at least in the first year of the program, of the PhD program. I
mm-hmm,
lost like any twinkle of joy. Like broadly, I'm a generally happy person. I like to laugh, I like to be with people, meet people. But the first year of that program, it was all work, no play. It was, I'm figuring
mm,
things out, I'm learning all of these things. And it wasn't until I let myself make a batch of lotion for the first time, because I
mm-hmm,
was in Philly with no humidity, a harsher winter, and my body was like reacting to it. And it
mm-hmm,
wasn't until I let myself try something like this, make something, instead of crying and fussing about, I quit my job, I'm way poor. I can't
mm.
afford like the good lotion and things, but I can afford a couple of ingredients. Now let me sit the books down, sit the papers down, and go in
Mhm,
the kitchen and be. And it wasn't until I had that, gave myself the space to do that, that it felt like, oh, wait, I might have something. So I wouldn't have
wow.
had a project. I would not have had the same dissertation study if I didn't just stop and say, I'm exhausted, I'm worn out,
Mhm,
I need to do something else. And by
mm,
something else, what is my fun space? What is my creative space? And that's always
wow.
been making a thing. That's why I worked in a lab. I love to do stuff with my hands and pipette all day and figure out, whatever the product was of whatever test I ran. That was always rewarding. So
Mhm,
until I became a human again and not a PhD student computer that only read papers and put
mm,
out annotated bibliographies, until I became a whole person and said, what do I need to do to support my body in this cold climate? That's
mm,
when I had a project. That's when I had found something that was exciting again. And it wasn't at all just reading research papers.
wow.
And so when
So,
you said your music, that's what it I thought about it. It's like you have to give yourself the permission to sit the other stuff down and
yeah.
find what you were happy about before.
Wow. I was about to respond to what you said about permission,
Mm.
because you're like, when do you get that? You're never going to get that permission.
You take it. Yeah.
You have to, give yourself.
Hmm.
I was even surprised actually. There are some people now and again I try to chat with who it seemed they were out of the box thinking. And then I would push the envelope a little bit by making some suggestions and saying what I'm going to do, and then realize, wow, this person is not as out of the box as I thought,
Hmm.
because we get trapped in. This person has a big institution identity, right?
Yeah.
That trumps their individual identity, which is
Right.
why the thing I talk about identity. But I was really surprised, just how tense that is.
Hmm.
So if you are in a place where institution thinking is the only thing that matters,
Yeah.
you'll never get that permission to be innovative or to think
Hmm.
outside the box,
Hmm.
because it'll be based on whatever benefits the permission. And I had the same thought. I was like, oh my gosh, do I have to be poor to do this?
Right.
And so I've been working on this for a number of years. I'm about to launch something big. I'll
Hmm.
talk to you later, but
I'm
I'll probably
excited.
announce it in the next week or so.
Okay.
Because these are thinking I've been grappling for years and
Hmm.
years. Many of us are now starting to see the impact of this institutional thinking, especially when it comes to our funding,
Hmm.
where I had to grapple with it a long time ago, and a lot of it was intentional. which is why I had started seeking funding elsewhere,
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
things because, we our institution identity was so strong that we didn't really realize that it was a no to us, but a yes to the institution,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
We
mm-hmm.
didn't really see that distinction because our work aligned with institution thinking or group
Right.
thinking.
And it doesn't help that that's how you're promoted.
Yes.
My the academic currency is citations, papers,
Hmm.
and those papers stay within the ivory tower. And
Yeah.
if my heart's work is with folks that are not in said ivory tower, now it's I'm checking boxes over here and putting myself just to do this work so I can keep my job and get promoted and have good evaluations, but not ever reaching the people I want to reach. Yeah,
Right.
because
Right.
that's what they say we're supposed to do. Yes. So now it's always this duality of, okay, what or how can I, shift some of the work that has been only published in certain areas and accessible to certain people. How do I now share that like smartly without,
Hmm.
infringing upon copyright issues? Because if it's in a journal, that's
Hmm.
their, property now. That's their paper. So how do you still kind of make it more accessible in layman's terms, but still keep the integrity of the research? So I think that's where I'm moving towards slowly but surely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because nothing gets me
Mm-hmm.
more excited than to see Black women and girls working together and being scientists doing their own hair and talking about hair products versus putting it on a page, sending it to a reviewer too, and
Hmm.
getting back whatever that feedback is. But it's like, no, I need to put this in the hands of the middle school girl who says science isn't for me. Like that's the one I'm trying to talk to. So
Hmm.
how to smartly do that. It's a process. I'm learning.
It's a process,
Yeah.
but it comes with the focus on bridging theory and practice, right? Putting
Mhm.
research into practice and what that means for it to look a certain way. What would it
Mhm.
look like in practice?
Right. But that's
Um,
outside of the system. And so to be
mhm,
married to that system's thinking, but also to have this call outside of the system. It's that
mhm,
tension that some colleagues don't deal with. Like that's not a conversation you can just
mm-mm,
have in a break room somewhere. So it's also about finding your people and being in that community. I have a friend that I call all the
mhm.
time and I'm like, can you just tell me to sit still? Like tell me not to do this because me giving myself permission sometimes doesn't work. Like somebody just
Yeah.
tell me it's okay. Like remind me that the world will not unravel if I don't check my email one more time tonight. Like
Mm,
so it's that self-care beyond the bubble bath. Like I just need to put it down.
yeah.
So it's again in these built-in ways like how are you caring for yourself while doing the work you need to do, like literally having the job, also doing soul work that you need to do
Hmm.
and still not losing who you are in the process.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
After it's
Mm,
a fumbling process
it
because I've lost
is.
myself plenty of times and you come
Yeah.
back, but when you make it more intentional you tend to lose yourself far less.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's great to see you, it's great to see you grappling with that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that to mean anything badly or anything. I
Yeah.
just think
Yeah.
that I've been seeing a lot lately how, even with encouraging, some peers in the field to venture out there, there's a fear
Mm-hmm.
to venture out because we've put ourselves in this box because we're told that there's this formula. There's you do this, you do this, you do this, and this is how you're rewarded. And so in thinking about the reward, I think a lot of our peers are thinking they're going to be punished.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, I was very intentional with getting myself out of that box. I spent a lot of time, a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
um, joining different type of entrepreneurship groups, pitching. Actually, I joined multiple, and I paid an enormous amount of money
Mm-hmm.
for joining quite a few, just to help me to think differently,
Right.
because I needed to understand also how other people are thinking, and how understanding how institutions, this is a business model here,
Right.
right?
Right.
And how is this working in this business model, what's working, what's not working. And I get to see the difference in what institutions are working and what's not, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
here you have, your professors, you're doing three different jobs, right? Your
Right.
service, your research,
Mm-hmm. And you're teaching.
and your teaching. Those are three different, I mean, you
And
literally,
nobody tells you that.
it's three
Like
different
these are
jobs.
different, like they slice differently. Yes.
Completely,
Mm-hmm.
and to do those three, where you have to plan, you planning a lesson, somebody has a full-time job doing that,
Yes.
whereas you're
Yes.
doing it as if it's a
As one
third,
full-time job.
right?
Yeah.
But then you're told it's 60%, but you only research, but you only get 10% at a time, and
That's what they
so
say.
and the only time you get to do it maybe is in the summer months, but it doesn't quite,
Yeah.
the compartmentalizing thing, and
Mm-hmm.
so what you begin to see is that those institutions that have the business model where they cater for you being in that innovative research mode,
Right.
rewarding that mode rather than rewarding it with giving you the technical, you know, I've read tons of books too. And one of my favorite, oh my gosh, I know I should remember his name, Henderson's, about just really what it means to find your own genius, to live with your genius,
Yeah.
your zone of genius versus living in your zone of
You
excellence.
recommended that book to me. Yes.
I did.
Yes. Two of his books.
uh,
I have one of them. I'm still waiting to purchase the other one, but you recommended those to me. Yes.
okay, so maybe well, we have to talk about that another time.
Yes.
um you know well, I guess I'll ask you, did you get to reading it yet?
I haven't read it yet. So I
Okay.
have two books I'm reading this summer.
Yeah.
One is is it like how to tap into it's a blue one. It's like a
Okay.
bluey white cover. And then the other one I'm reading is Dr. Tima Bryant Homecoming.
Yep. Yeah,
So
I
I
remember
have
that
both
one, I
of those
recognize. Okay.
for my summer reading. I started Homecoming, but I put it down because I realized I want to have some space to sit with it. And
Right.
I feel, and that's a part of like, that's what I've learned is if there are books that are going to shift the way I'm thinking about like taking care of myself and showing up as a
Mm-hmm.
whole person and doing work that is for like doing soul work instead of
Mm-hmm.
doing systems work or instead of doing just the work on my job
Mm-hmm.
description,
Right.
that I need to also have some space to rest with those words and work around them. And summer is more conducive to that than
Yeah,
spring and fall with grades and students everywhere. So
I understand
yeah,
completely.
yeah. So
Okay.
I want to give myself some space to sit outside, get on a
Mm-hmm.
swing somewhere, and just read those books and read and journal, journal and read, and go back and
Yay.
forth. Yeah.
Well, that's good. You started with Dr. Theron Bryant's one. It's so one of the ways that one has really changed my life.
Hmm.
Um, well, you'll see when you get there. I'm just gonna say one sentence.
Yes.
One of the ways that's really changed my life is, and really, really freed me, is something she said in her later chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna give it away here.
No, I'm fine. I'm gonna read the whole book. It's fine.
Right. she One of the things she says is, if no one ever recognizes you, if no one ever recognizes you, will you recognize yourself?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so much of the decision making that came after that, even
Yeah.
the decisions like, I'm gonna launch this podcast. I'm gonna
Yeah.
recognize myself, recognize the work that I've done,
Yeah.
right? It's not like I'm gonna have all these people inviting me because they want to hear what I have to say, even
Mm-hmm.
though I have a lot to say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to recognize myself. No one else has to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if it reaches one, two, three, it would have been worth it.
Right.
But she says amazingly powerful things, and the things
Yes.
I love about what she says is it's within the context you know, of our own lived experience,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I contrast that with, someone had recommended a book, not a program, I'm a part of.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you more about it and I'll unfold it. So they recommended a book. It's an amazing, it seems like a great book.
Mm-hmm.
It's written by a white male author,
Mm-hmm.
and he had an amazing story to begin the book. I kind of stuck at the first page because he talks about his story, which is incredible. And talks about the hardship he's been through. And then he talks about, um, the challenge of his life as a teen and, using drugs and, how his moment when he thought, if I just lifted my hand, he had a, there was a high speed chase involved. And I wish I remember the name of the book. High cheese pain chase involved, and he's taught to himself if he lifted his hand and pretended, of course, his story ends where he goes on to be successful. Well,
Mhm.
I hate to say, I stopped at the beginning of the book,
Okay.
and the reason why is, when you read a story like that, and you think to myself, well, yeah, what if it was a black guy?
Right.
It would
Right.
have been, it would have
A
been shot, and I was
completely
just like,
different story. Yeah.
it's just, and so
Right.
there's a lot of times I just have a really hard time, and
I can't buy into it. Yeah.
it's hard to buy into it because that story doesn't really end that way for us,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so,
That's me in fiction. So I think it was the Iron Man, the first Iron Man movie. It was recommended to me. You're gonna love it. It has so
yeah.
much science in it. Watch the Iron Man movie. I watch it and I see this interaction between like him and the assistant or
Hmm.
the woman character that he ends up saving at the end. And all I could think was, if it were a black woman, like would that even would there be the same onus to save her, to keep her,
Yeah.
to listen to her? And I was just like, hmm. So it was really hard for me
Hmm.
to watch the movie with all the cool science in it, just to be like, this isn't my movie. Like, I'm not seeing me here. Like this
Hmm.
version of entertainment, I'm not that entertained because it's hard to turn it off, right? I'm still
Right.
always thinking intersections, thinking theory, thinking what about identity and shifting and these negotiations between characters. And I'm like, wait a minute, if it were me. Also, if Iron Man were a black man, right? Like, where would some of these liberties not quite fit? So,
Get shot out of the air.
right, like this would not be a movie. It wouldn't continue. Like, no.
Sorry. I know you
Yeah.
should laugh, but it's just, but that's where mine goes. It reminds me of, there is a, I was talking to a teacher. We were talking about, she has black and white students in our
Hmm.
class, our elementary classroom, and we were talking about, I think it was elementary, it wasn't middle. We're talking about how, our black student kids weren't reading, and
Hmm.
we were talking about what was on the shelf.
Right.
And talking, and speaking of self-care beyond bubble baths, we
Hmm.
really don't realize how a lot of times we assault our kids by giving them things to read that really diminishes them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But our children are talking to us about it, the fact that they don't want to read. Well, you think it's because they're black? No.
No. Yeah.
This is a fact that the books are on a shelf. Yeah, the white kids are running for it because that's their
Hmm.
books. That book
Hmm.
was created for them, so they're
Hmm.
running towards it,
And they can see
right?
themselves, they can connect with it, but it's, yeah, the same effort or opportunity isn't always given to all the students in the class.
Or thinking,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? And so you said something. You mentioned a book, and I'm so curious about it because when I hear things like that, I kind of run the other way. I'll be honest.
Hmm.
Rest as resistance. I'm
Yes.
thinking when I think of the word resistance, I just think it's exhausting just to think
Yes.
of resistance, and I don't want
To
to think of
resist
rest
is
as
exhausting.
resistance at all.
Yes.
And so if I saw that, I would just dismiss it. To be honest.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what do you mean?
Right. Well, how does this work? And I mean, and there is a lot of conversation still because it is a more recent book, but she's been doing work around the topic for over 10 years and leading group naps. Like this started, there were webinars to just
Mhm.
nap during the early parts of the pandemic, like starting in 2020. And it is something that I keep in my pocket. It's not necessarily something I say all day or practice toward, but it is like coming back to yourself and recognizing yourself. And sometimes we just need a nap. And it's true.
Mm.
Into how is that a part of your resistance, right? What does it mean to now say, I'm not working between 4 and 7, and I'm going to lay down at 5:30 to 6 o'clock, and then I'm going to make dinner after that. That is a part of the resistance that I'm expected to work sun up to sundown. I'm expected to be responding to emails all the time. And I think it's more of a choice. So that's still that self care beyond bubble baths. It's
Mhm.
how am I taking care of myself amongst all of this as a part of this push against capitalism, this push against this individualism, push against always racing to be better and competing in every way. It's I'm going to rest as a part of saying no to all of the systems working around me, and resistance is exhausting, and it's kind of it feels oxymoronic, right?
Mhm.
It's like how am I supposed to resist and rest at the same time? But it's in the choices that we make, again, the smaller choices, that if I have to work, I'm going to, like, reasons why I'm working in front of a window. If I have to sit at this computer, I'm at least going to see the birds. If
Mhm.
I have to be here, I have like a lumbar support thing, I'm gonna be comfortable. and it's and I learned that as a product of graduating during the pandemic.
Mhm.
I was home in a studio apartment writing a dissertation, and was this it was really hard to reconcile in my mind that I am writing chapters of this big work from a
Mhm.
couch, because I had a studio. I did not have a set up
Mhm.
designated work spot because I would go to
Mhm.
campus to work. But when
Mhm.
campus is closed for months because there's a virus outside,
Yeah.
now I am in this studio apartment that I purposefully made like very soft. I had like a big high pile rug, different blankets in different spots because I wanted to come home to rest, go
Mhm.
to campus to work. And then I had to make it all one workspace. And I
Mhm.
was like, I can't sit on this couch comfortably and work. That just doesn't feel right. And it's also, who said? So why not? So my self care past the bubble bath in that moment was to sit under the fleece blanket, to have my feet up on the ottoman, and to be working really hard on my lit review. And
Mhm.
then and it's like, this feels, for my body, this feels weird because I'm used to sitting up in a computer chair at a desk, at a cubicle,
Mhm.
work, 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 and work only. But now I'm laying on the couch with my feet up, music in the background. I've made some tea, and I'm still able to get it done.
Mhm.
Oh, it doesn't have to hurt. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to, be the most excruciating thing ever. Did I still,
Mhm.
get to those points of frustration? Yes. Did I still have to get up and walk away from it? Yes. But also,
Mhm.
it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be sun up to sundown, sitting at the desk, work, 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 and then go home and fall apart and like be exhausted and then go back to campus.
Mhm.
COVID had other plans. And it was in those moments that I'm like, okay, so I can do hard things from soft spaces, right? My self-care past the bubble bath was, how do I have a soft space to do the work? How do I have a space that I want to work in? This
Mhm.
is my office. And
Yeah.
I get to work and write in here around plants. Um, Intentionally placing plants that do clean the air. That's what that little snake plant does.
Mhm.
Like, purposefully in knowing what you need past, again, a bubble bath, past a
Mhm.
massage. I need to have different drinks. I love to have a hot drink. Like, I have coffee and I have water. Like, I
Mhm.
like to have something where the temperatures are different, tastes are
Awesome.
different, because I like to have options. And knowing that, anytime I sit down to write or sit down to grade, which
Mhm.
hurts my soul, I have to, how do I make it the most ease? How do I make it the most
Yeah.
comforting place? If I'm going to do it, my self care here is what they say, what the kids say, the soft life. I'm going to do it softly.
Mhm.
And I think that's a part of the resistance. It doesn't have to be painful and break your soul. And I don't
Wow.
know, no one said that out loud. I've seen like advisors work in that way,
Mhm.
but I think I get to say it out loud and tell, especially other Black women, that do the most, because that's what we
Mhm.
do. We're going to be
Mhm.
excellent in every way, but also you get to rest too. You get to have a
Yeah.
soft spot and make that for yourself, because
Mhm.
outside is not going to make it. None of the classes that you take will be soft or intentionally offering ease. Nope, you have papers to write and peer reviews to do and discussion boards to post,
Mhm.
and the world is constantly falling apart. So how
Yeah.
do you take care of you in that way that's not just, oh, when I think about it, I'm going to go get a massage, or when I've saved enough money, or when I feel like I've earned it. It's like, no, you get to have these soft spaces built in.
Wow.
Yeah. But what does
Oh,
that mean? What does that look?
yeah.
Who's going to tell the first year student, right? You get to have a soft space.
Yeah. It's almost well, I'm thinking a couple things. Uh I'm thinking, I guess, going back to what I'd asked you, and I love all the examples you gave, um, to show, but I still ask myself, why do we call it resistance instead of restoration, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
almost feels as if we're still obviously we're defining it relative to the system and the institution and the environment that we're
Yeah.
in, right? Where sometimes it seems like we still feel like we need permission.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, permission to rest, right? As opposed to, look,
It's your right to
I
rest.
absolutely, like, it just makes sense,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes we see it more when we start to think outside the box, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When we see, you need to rest if you're going to be innovative. You need a
Mm-hmm.
certain level of rest if you're going to be, in that mode, that creative mode of putting things together and figuring things out. And then you really see the need for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to allowing yourself to succumb to a lot of the, some of the technical time wasters that you can get someone to do that doesn't have, needed someone with a doctorate to do, right? This
Yeah.
is the part that gets me. We get a lot of stuff
Mm-hmm.
where we asked to do that really doesn't require a
We don't need
talent.
to do it. Yeah.
And so, I struggle with that. And it's like, you just
Mm-hmm.
want to wait. You're just
Because
wasting
if
my
we're
time,
only
right?
resisting, are we restoring, right? If we're
What's
only
that?
if we're only resisting, are we restoring? If we're only
Hmm.
resisting, are we creating? Or is it always resisting? Like, what's your intention or purpose for the rest? And I
Hmm.
don't see it as resisting. I recognize that it is resisting to make the choice to not
Hmm.
participate in the hamster wheel, but my rest is the restoration, and
Hmm.
conveniently also it can't resist. So I think it's a choice. I like I like the restoration instead of resistance, because that's what I'm intentionally choosing, is to
Yeah.
restore versus I get to resist as a part of it.
Hmm.
But that's not my main focus. So yeah, to call it rest as rest for creativity, rest for restoration, rest for joy. First, and it's also resistance.
Yeah. I guess it's like the resistance part is for everybody else,
Mhm.
right? Because
Mhm.
that's the only way people get the message or
Yeah.
understand the message,
Mhm.
right?
But how do
Um,
you I get what you're saying. Like, how do you shift it to focus on you? My rest is for my rest. That's it. Like, it doesn't have to be for my creating a thing. It doesn't have to be fuel for the transformation. It's I'm still a human. And I struggle with that a
mm,
lot. I have a friend
yeah.
that says, "You're not a computer." I'm like, darn it. I thought I was. I was operating as one at one point. But it's yeah, I get to rest because I'm a being that requires rest for growth, that requires rest for healing, that
Hmm.
requires rest as a part of a process to balance my body. It has
Hmm.
to rest. So it's not just rest as resistance, but rest as a human, rest as a part of growing, as a part of healing, as a part of restoring cells. Like, some cells only fix themselves when you sleep, and
Hmm.
sometimes your blood pressure gets low enough when you sleep. So, how do you offer good rest to yourself? That's that beyond a bubble bath. So, I don't sleep well. I don't rest well. I knew that.
Hmm.
And then I had to learn some things like nighttime routines. My therapist called it what, bedtime hygiene. I was like, ah, yay. So it's now, how do you support yourself in letting yourself heal, letting your cells restore,
Hmm.
letting things grow, letting things die and shed, all
Hmm.
while you rest. So, and again, I have 2 degrees in biology. You think I know this? Applying it is a different story. So yeah, it all makes sense. Like, I can talk it through and make it flow, connect all the dots, but then putting it into practice, you're like, oh, I know this.
Hmm.
I know this. And then once it becomes a part of the routine, it's like, oh, I could just sleep. When I'm ready to cry, go take a nap. Like, or have you eaten? That's my favorite one because usually no, I have not had food. So
Yeah.
go eat food. Like you're not a computer.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're reminding me of some of the remnants of, colonized way of thinking, colonized way of
Mhm.
thinking about black people, colonized way of
Mhm.
thinking about black women. Um, I think especially, um, I think that, wow, I think so. Let me just make sure there are no, let's see if there are any thoughts or questions. I don't see any so far. Okay. So, looks like our the live portion of our LinkedIn feed might not have worked, but that's okay. Well, I'll figure
All
out
good.
troubleshoot later. Oh, it is working. Oh, I just was in the wrong. Okay, so it did work. All right, let me see if any comments. Okay, so what do we want people to take away from this in terms of self care? Beyond bubble
Beyond the
baths, and,
bubble
and
bath.
what that means. Um, in terms of, well, I'll let you go for it.
um, I want people to take away daily practice as
Hmm.
self care versus it being a calendar event. Like you shouldn't have to put it on your calendar as you would a nail appointment, as you would a chiropractor appointment,
Hmm.
a picnic with friends. Your self care starts when you wake up. It continues when you lay down to rest, like lay down
Hmm.
to sleep at night. It is a part of like being mindful when you're pouring coffee,
Hmm.
doing certain things one thing at a time, not 17 things as a multitasker. What does it
Yeah.
mean to let yourself focus?
Hmm.
And it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do when we are very skilled at doing seven things at one time.
Hmm.
Very, I can do it, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. You're not
Yeah.
doing it as efficiently. And how can you like scale that down, focus on one thing? So it's this intention. I want people to take away that your self care is intentional. And it doesn't have to look like something you've seen before. I have a friend that saw that I journaled. I told her that I journaled. It really helps me process things that happen during the day. I don't journal
Hmm.
every day, but some days are just more spaces where I don't get to just have my own thoughts. So they'll
Hmm.
back to back, very engaging. And it's at the end of those days, I just need to let my brain fall out. And so I just write, write, write. And she said that she doesn't enjoy writing because it's starting on like a blank page. It's starting at this
Mm.
thing. And what am I supposed to put on the page?
Hmm.
But she's also an artist. She did, let me see, that one and that one.
Oh, I can't
And
see.
I
Yeah.
said, I told
Oh,
her,
I
I
see. Yeah.
said, you should draw. I was like, you don't have to journal with words,
Hmm.
draw it out. And
Yeah.
she caught herself like doodling and then going into a paragraph and then doodling, going
Mm.
into a paragraph. And I
Hmm.
talked to her again a few weeks after that. I'm not asking to like see her journal, but saying like, how's it going? What does it look like? And she's like, I just never thought to draw first. And I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, that you get to just because my
Yeah.
journaling doesn't include drawing because I'm a horrible artist, terrible at it. I would rather like write things down. Also, journaling handwriting versus journaling typing. Some people
Hmm.
prefer to type, and it doesn't have to look any one way. It's this process of learning what flows best for
Hmm.
you. And so I want that intention to be what flows best. And that means trying some things out. That means hating some things. I
Hmm.
love to color. My sister hates to color. She's like, it's too focused. I have to stay in
Yeah.
the lines. Meanwhile, I'm like, oh, my brain's off. Yay.
Yeah.
And it's what works for you and being
Hmm.
intentional about adding those things in that allow you to have some joy, that you give
Hmm.
yourself permission to have this lightness, have this goodness amongst the wildness,
Hmm.
but being able to support yourself. So it's intentional. Sometimes it is a bubble bath. Sometimes it
Hmm.
is the massage chair at the nail salon. Other
Hmm.
times it's putting your feet in the grass, facing the sun and doing some square breathing. Other
Mhm.
times it's getting cold water and drinking it slowly. And that's all that you're doing is drinking cold water and breathing.
Mhm.
And that's self care. So
Yeah.
I want it to be intentional for people. I want folks to try things, even if it's yoga, if it's hot yoga, if it's group
Mhm.
Zumba, stuff like that. Like places where it's I need to push myself a little bit. I know I need
Mhm.
to move my body. I don't want to do it at home, but I also don't want people looking at me. What do I do? Just try it. You
Wow.
might hate it. Okay. And then on your way to the Zumba class, you see a new park. Go for a walk in the park. Like it's what is it that you are allowing yourself to do on purpose for your own goodness, for your own
Yeah.
restoration? I think that's the what I want people to take. It's your self-care is not just a bubble bath, it's not just a massage. It can look like a good cup of water,
Mm.
a infused cup of water, because now I learned about inflammation and I'm going to add ginger into my water to combat inflammation. Like this intentionality. What is it that
Mhm.
you need to for your next steps and to be intentional about those?
Wow. Wow. Before I say what that means to me, I wanted to make sure everybody understand we're not saying not to work,
Yes.
right? Because you're being paid to do a job and you need to do it
Yes. Do your
well.
job. Yes.
But I think the question is, what do we also need your bosses to
Hmm.
understand, right? We need them
Hmm.
to understand that for you to function well and to even do a good job at that, then you do need that time. Sometimes you need
Hmm.
to pause, right? But it's important. We have jobs to do. We need to do our jobs. We need to
Yes.
do it well. But the unique thing about academia is oftentimes we are allowed to create our own hours, right?
Hmm.
And what ends up happening is that that of working spills over into everything where you're
Yes.
working sometimes all day, right? You're
Hmm.
working, it's not a typical, 9 to 5 type of job. You're working weekends and you're researching and all day long,
Hmm.
and sometimes when you have to take a break and our brain only turns on for a certain amount of time for
Hmm.
writing. And it's when you were mentioning, I was thinking, yeah, that's what we do with kids. We ask them to draw first, right? And
Right.
to do art first to
Hmm.
get their thinking and their mind flowing. um but when I also think of self-care, I've been practicing self care more,
Hmm.
mostly because, when you're at a stage when you're, overcoming, the burnout, it takes a long time. It
Yeah.
takes, months and months, to work on that, you know.
Hmm.
And so, part of what I do intentionally, um, I do little things. Some of them I'm embarrassed to say, things I've never done before. I'm like, wow, I never realized. I never understand why people do that. Where people, whereas to me before it seemed like a waste of time,
Hmm.
right? But I also have been very intentional about, for example, making sure, our Sunday, like, because we live there's so many churches, we decide we would explore churches, for
Hmm.
example, right? And that gives us an opportunity for to spend time with family, to
Yeah.
do things as part of self care.
Hmm.
And for me, that part of self care is also, even though some people might see it as work, is let's pause and sit down and have
Yeah.
dinner as a family, right? And things like that. Let's talk.
Hmm. Hmm. That intentionality. It's
Mm-hmm.
what can we do on purpose that
Yeah.
it might be work for somebody, but if you love to host, if you love to cook, that's restorative to you.
Yeah.
Do it. And I'm one of those. I love to cook,
Yeah.
and I have other
Mm-hmm.
friends that are like, "You're chopping again. Please stop chopping things." But I love to hand chop all the vegetables because it has me here in this moment doing this thing. I
Mm-hmm.
can't chop the vegetables and respond to an email. I can't
Mm-hmm.
chop the vegetables and write a paper. I chop
Right.
the vegetables and only chop the vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
I bring the food out and sit at the table, and I can't, it would be rude, right? I have to be the
Mm-hmm.
good host. Let me be here in this moment. So that's
Absolutely.
the self-care. That's the this is good to me. How do I dive into that? How do I lean into that? How do I do more
Mm-hmm.
of do the things that feel good? I think we feel like it's sinful
Mm-hmm.
to feel good sometimes. It's like you get
Mm-hmm.
to feel good. You get to feel good and push back. your whole lot in life is not to push back, it's to be yourself. It's to, do you recognize you? Like what
Mhm.
Dr. Bryant was saying. Like, are you capable of not losing you? Are you coming
Mhm.
home to you? And I think we find such joy and such, we get our good good deed stamps when we push, push, push and resist
Absolutely.
forever. But did we lose ourselves? Yeah.
Wow. I'm so glad you said that because I've been doing that too, more cooking more,
Hmm.
which has been really nice. And it's, you see how I like to rationalize thing. Like I need a rationale. Um, nice to slow you down
Yes.
and forces you to be in, like you said, in the moment.
Hmm.
It's weird. I don't think I realized I enjoy it, except that
Hmm.
you need that moment to enjoy it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's part of, again, I always I've said this before and I'm gonna say it again. I'm thinking of Whitney Houston's song "Love," learning to love yourself is the
Hmm.
greatest love of all, and it's really, that song is really for us, isn't it?
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know um where we have to learn to love ourselves
Yeah.
in
And
that
I
way.
think in supporting people in whatever that looks like. I'm a
Hmm.
wild person in that I like to babysit. I love to babysit. But it's again that intentionality. If I have a 6 month old, I cannot be repotting plants, cooking a dinner, and
Hmm.
babysitting a 6 month old. I am with this 6 month old the whole time. So it's this focus, it's this intentionality, it's this choosing to turn off other things to be present.
Hmm.
And that's what that self care can look like. It's the turning off of other things and choosing what feels good right now for me and is restorative, is joyful, it is exciting, it's
Hmm.
engaging curiosity. But what is that?
Hmm.
So some people would choose never to be with the baby. Meanwhile, I'm like, this is joy for me.
Hmm.
This is restorative to me. Other folks would
Absolutely.
let me dog walk, let me babysit your fur babies, and it's not that I would never, but give me a baby first. So, or it's even working with like after school programs or watching children explore. That's
Hmm.
totally fun and soul just stirring, and other people would never. So it's, what is it that works for you? If your thing
Yeah.
is quiet in a coffee shop, reading a book, a little bit of people watching, do more of that. And it's okay. It's learning what works for you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Of course.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to post it. I'll take one last peek, and I'm going to say, um, Dr. Likely, if you can wrap up any last minute thoughts. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Last minute thoughts, self care beyond bubble baths and including bubble baths. I hope that something was said to spark interest, something that was worth, following
Hmm.
research on it, looking it up, whether it's making teas. I love to make teas, and you
Hmm.
can make that your own special project. What can you pour yourself into that's not just work? How are you
Mm,
restoring yourself, choosing your own well being that isn't a heavy lift, that isn't like soul dragging, that isn't
mhm.
taking all the energy from you? Where are we finding and choosing to restore ourselves? So
Wow.
do that every day. Choose something to give back to yourself every day. And that's that self care beyond the bubble bath. That's everyday, daily practice of caring for your whole human self.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lightly.
Of
Self care
course.
beyond bubble baths. Self care to replenish your
Hmm.
mind so you can do better,
Hmm.
and be better,
Hmm.
for whatever goals you have. And so, thanks to those who joined us today. Please feel free to comment or, add any additional comments or questions in the chat. Dr. Likely will be back
Yes.
next week. We're going to talk about communities.
Yes.
Um, I realized I didn't name it in the LinkedIn live portion, but I did in the YouTube. So I'll try and add that before so
Okay.
people know what we're going to talk about. So thanks to those who join us. If you like this episode, please like it and please subscribe to Learning for Truth and Love so that you can get future episodes. Okay, have a great day, guys.